Advancing the cause of liberty takes more than just coming up with ideas. It means making them happen. This is Society and the State. Life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Brian Hyde.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today on episode 111 to talk about the late John McCain. Now, it's important, I think Brian and I both agree that the intent here is not to disrespect John McCain or his family or anything of the sort, but the insight that we gain from analyzing what just happened in the media with his passing, I think is very instructive for us to identify a problem that at least Brian and I perceive, and perhaps you'll agree. And then if we have that agreement on what this problem is, we can begin to talk about like what would be an appropriate alternative. How should things be different? Brian, so we're recording this. We're going to publish it, I think, in a few more days. But right now when we're recording, it's only been a few days since John McCain passed away. Tell me, in kind of the online social media world, in your circle of friends, what was the observation that you had of the passing of John McCain? What did you see kind of happening on social media?
Well, a conflict developed, if you can believe that. On social media, there were people disagreeing. No, it was weird. His death became almost a litmus test of, do you love this country or not? And if you love the country, ostensibly, you're going to heap praise on him as a humanitarian and what a great man, he served his country, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, if you criticized him, you must hate the country, you must hate the flag, you must hate everything that John McCain stood for. The interesting thing was the reaction of the press and the reaction of the political class. Mm-hmm. You know, there was very, I think you used the word reverential treatment, and not everybody who even knew about John McCain, really knew what to think of him. Well, yeah, he was a senator, he was a very well-known politician, but they clearly hadn't looked at his record to try to discern from his actions what kind of life did he lead. And I say that with, there's no intent here to start a dog pile on him. Just if you're going to weigh the guy's life, it's okay to be honest.
And I think, after I observed for a few days what was happening, I finally decided to post. And I wanted to clarify that, again, just as we said at the outset here, the intent is not to say that we should not bemoan the loss of any individual. These people have family who love them. They have personal, familial relationships, friends, outside of politics, outside of disagreement on policy. Clearly, for all of those people, it is a loss that their, husband, father, friend, neighbor, whoever passed away. So obviously there's that kind of separate issue that when anyone dies, even, the craziest of people, there's still those people who mourn them, who knew them as something other than their public persona and their votes and their statements and so forth. And so that obviously want to concede that there's that element here to be had. But Brian, I share your observation that the political class, the media, were bending over backwards almost to heap praise on John McCain, almost as kind of a contest to prove which organ of the mainstream media, which politician could out-patriotize the others. Right? Like it was this well, you praise the hero, I'm going to praise the hero even more, and I'm going to use this adjective instead.
I'll outpraise thee.
Yeah. And it was almost disgusting to see the degree to which the passing of John McCain masked, in my mind, all of his life, his political public life. I mean, he was a public figure throughout his life, basically since Vietnam. And I think that's a disservice. Obviously, okay, people say, you don't want to make it political, save that for tomorrow. Let's at least, okay, fine, right? Here we are recording this a few days later, and yet you don't see any context, any nuance there of okay, well, where we're talking about John McCain, let's have a frank discussion about John McCain, because in my mind, Brian, and I want to get your take on this, it's not really about John McCain. The views we have about John McCain are kind of like you said, a litmus test. It's a window into what we're going to be thinking about other people and other issues. What do you think?
No, I think the tell for what you're describing here, all that lavish praise and this effusive memorializing that the press was saying, you got to remember, this is the same press that back in 2008, when he was the Republican presidential candidate, they were talking about how this guy's too mentally ill. He's too unstable. He's a cranky old warmonger. I mean, what an interesting flip. Mm-hmm. Why do you suppose that they changed their tune so much in that short span of time?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, clearly, I think the media and those who own the different stations have intent, just as they do now. And I think part of the answer, Brian, to your question is in heaping praise on McCain, especially the George Soroses of the world and the leftist media outlets. There's something else going on. And as I just said, it's not just about John McCain. It's about other people and issues. And I think at least part of the answer is McCain's kind of rogue criticism of Donald Trump. The media has been, again, bending over backwards to try and attack Donald Trump at every turn. Not to say that a lot of that is not justified. I'm not going to sit here and defend Donald Trump. But it's clear that the media has turned into, I don't even know what the word would be for it. It's not journalism. Right?
Sycophants.
Yeah, great word, right? Like this is very intentional political manipulation of the public mind. It's not a fair and balanced journalistic, even-handed, we report, you decide kind of thing. This is very much we're trying to shape public opinion. We're trying to, say look at this, but don't look at that. And I think McCain's passing allows these leftist institutions to claim patriotism, to claim support, when in reality, I think what's happening is they are elevating a person who is very critical of Donald Trump in order to further suppress and denigrate Donald Trump.
There's two things that come to mind as I look at the way his death and the eulogizing has been covered. One is I think about the story about Joseph Stalin giving a speech and how the people who were in attendance, all the party members, they applauded and nobody wanted to be the first person to stop clapping and sit down. And so people clapped until their hands are like sore, but they're terrified because the first person to stop clapping is going to be, less supportive of the dear leader. Uh-huh. And in that same vein, John McCain is probably a good example, or his death, the way that he's being treated, posthumously, is a great example of how the state, government at any level, co-opts the term hero and applies it only to those who serve its interests. And where he wore the uniform and he served the interest, then as a senator, and I think he may even have saved Obamacare, from some Republican wrangling.
What a hero! Yeah,
but that's why we're supposed to regard him as a hero, and there's really not supposed to be any dissent. I think Tom Woods pointed out, if you dissent, well, that's considered hateful, as opposed to wait a minute, why are we doing this again?
Yeah. And part of my frustration in all of this McCain stuff, not that I disagree with anything you just said, I think that is all absolutely true. To me, it's the hypocrisy of it. And what I mean by that is people caught up in what the media has been doing, what politicians have been doing, what is now in vogue to heap praise upon the hero. As people have been caught up into that, it's kind of a classic example in my mind of Bastiat's idea of that which is seen and that which is not seen, right? This economic idea where it's very easy to focus on that which is immediately perceptible when you can see the effects of something or you can see something, whereas it's tough to be a good economist which can contemplate things that are not seen, things that are out of view, things that you don't immediately recognize and are not immediately apparent. And I think the same thing plays in here, and what I mean by that is that throughout his political life, John McCain has been directly responsible, in part. He's just one vote, but he's an influential vote when it comes to foreign policy and agitation. He has been directly responsible for the displacement, the suffering, the harm, and the death of probably easily millions of people, especially in the Middle East, right? And those people don't make it on primetime news. Those people do not get the sympathy of the political class whose suffering is at their hand. They don't get the sympathy of the American public, who's not really made aware by these quote-unquote journalistic institutions. And why don't we feel the same outpouring of grief and support for those people? From my perspective, no matter the color of their skin or where they happen to pass through their mother's birth canal, whether it be in Texas or Afghanistan, they're all people. They have the same rights, and from my perspective, they're all God's children. And to see the fawning, the outpouring of thoughts and prayers for McCain and that's not even to say that in doing that, we should then also temper that with criticism. I'm not saying to criticize McCain right around the time of his passing. We can do that before and after. My point is, sure, have a little bit of outpouring of sympathy for his friends, family that bemoan that loss. But good grief, why do we not have, and where is the sympathy for all of those countless people who have been harmed and killed as a result of what this guy did in his life? To me, that is disgusting. It is imbalanced, and again, I see people reverencing and heaping praise upon McCain. That's fine, but it's hypocritical when they don't also do it, and then some, to all of the other people around the world, innocent people who have been harmed by what this gentleman did in his life. To me, that's a huge problem.
And I very much appreciated your post on Facebook where you pointed this out. I think actually it may have been the best post regarding John McCain or his passing that I had seen.
Thank you.
Because you challenged the narrative. And when I say the narrative, I mean the story that media and politicians and essentially the systems that try to rule us, there's a narrative they want us to believe. And that narrative does not include concern for the collateral damage made by or created by foreign policy decisions that, displace and harm and kill people, by the thousands.
Right.
So I'm grateful to see that, there are people out there who are thinking and challenging that narrative. But the message that you get here from the people who are being pilloried for pointing out, hey, John McCain really did agitate for war in this country, and this country, and this country, that's considered hateful because it challenges the narrative of, he served the state and what he did was noble because it was for the state, and, we're not supposed to question that, apparently.
And I just think back to all these people who praise America and the Constitution, the Revolution, and change places, right? Put on a red coat instead. And suddenly those people during the war against American independence on the British side were patriotic. They were serving the state. They were heroes in their own right, in their own perspective. And yet we would disagree on the other side. It clearly shows that there's often more than one perspective, and how ingrained we become in our own echo chamber of pseudo-American patriotism to think that, he's a great hero, without recognizing that to many other people, this man was a crazy tyrant. And that's not using any of the profanity that comes to mind, right? And that, I think, speaks to the problem. Brian, the concern that I have here is the oft-quoted phrase, was it Gideon Tucker? No, I'm trying to remember who said this. Upton Sinclair, somebody. Those who do not learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. Right? Everyone's heard this quote. Yep. I unfortunately can't attribute it off the top of my head. But those who don't learn from John McCain are condemned to produce more John McCains. Right? Like, if we don't take the opportunity to point out what was wrong here and what this guy did, we're going to have more of it. And to your point, I think that's what the state wants. And so they don't want that narrative to get out. They don't want that critical thinking. They don't want that dissent. And it's up to free-minded, independent thinking people, I think, to supply that dissent and that critical thought, because with these institutions of so-called journalism, we're definitely not getting it.
Tom Woods coined a phrase long before John McCain ever was diagnosed with a terminal illness. But his phrase was, no matter who you vote for, we always end up with John McCain. And I think it's so apropos. The establishment, the powers that be, were lauding McCain. Well, he was a maverick. He was, he marched to his own tune, and that's what made him heroic. And yet you and I would probably say, yeah, how exactly did he do anything that challenged the status quo?
Mm-hmm.
Now you look at somebody like Ron Paul, there's a maverick.
Yeah.
But do you think that the regime is going to, memorialize him and insist that flags be at half-staff for him and that people show proper respect?
No.
I doubt it.
Yeah. He'll go quietly into the night. Well, guys, hope you had a little bit of food for thought there. The concern, as we said at the beginning and here at the end, is, it's sad when any person dies. From my perspective, again, we're all God's children. We can all be redeemed, and we should all be sympathetic to especially the loved ones who are left behind. But these actions affect many people, and so it's incumbent upon us, I think, to have a bigger discussion about what these actions have been and if we want to see them happening again. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Stick around for next time. We have a really fun guest, societyandthestate.com. Make sure you're subscribed, tell your friends, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.